There are four things that emerge. First, God works in the lives of all people, foreigners included. I mentioned that Ruth appears in the New Testament. Yes, in the genealogy of Jesus. Of course, Jesus was descended from David, which means we wouldn't be sons and daughters of Jesus Christ, of the Lord through Jesus Christ. We wouldn't be his spiritual brothers and sisters. We wouldn't have been redeemed. We wouldn't have become Christians if Ruth hadn't married Boaz. If that hadn't happened, David wouldn't have been born, Jesus wouldn't have been born. Look at that line. In fact, there are four women in the genealogy of Matthew, chapter 1, who are foreigners. We have Rahab, Ruth, Bathsheba, and Tamar. And I would look at this another time. Of course, in one sense, we're all foreigners and aliens. And for those of you who've lived in different places or even different countries, you know that feeling. God works in all lives, even through difficult times and circumstances. But emphasizing here, he works with lives of foreigners. Yesterday, I met a man from Ethiopia. We had an incredible talk about faith. And I'm going to be giving him material, and we're going to be in touch, and he's going to come to church with me. And my eyes are open. I see people from all over the world. Our horizon is often, in a way, too high. There's not enough sky. It needs to be low and broad and expansive. God works in the lives of all people. Let's be on the lookout for what the Lord might be doing. Second thing we learn about God. God expects patience in the face of adversity. It may take some time. Poor Naomi, 10 years in Moab. Ruth comes back. She's no spring chicken. Will she marry or not? God expects patience in the face of adversity. It may take some time. Now, we mustn't take the law into our own hands. God's plan supersedes any cultural norms. In many cultures, people don't even marry. They wonder, well, why should I marry? A couple weeks ago when I was in England, I was talking to a teacher who asked her class something about marriage, and she asked them, do you think, children, that your parents should be married? They need to be married. And the kids said no. Why would they? Because most of the parents weren't married. They hadn't made that commitment. Well, what are we as Christians to do? To say, well, that's just the law, or this is getting legalized, and this is getting tolerated, and never. God's plan supersedes cultural norms. He expects patience even when things are hard. Number 3, we are to honor God's plan for marriage. This is based on character and commitment. Genesis shows us not only God's plan, 2:24, but also what happens when we ignore that plan and the rest of Genesis. The world doesn't understand. It's not just the world, but worldly churches who've watered down that expectation. I remember in 1989 when we moved to Sweden, in our apartment building, only 50% of the couples were married. Now, some 20 years later, in the United States, they say 50% of children born are not from two-parent families. The parents are not married to each other. How tragic, how challenging. Of course, God can work through it. But we mustn't follow the way of the world or the way of worldly churches. We're to honor God's plan for marriage. Number 4, when we do the right thing, God will work through us. Through Ruth, God gave us David. Through David, he gave us Jesus. Through Jesus, he gave us eternal life. So you never know how the Lord will use you when you do the right thing.